Paul, the Apostle Paul, was fascinating. Like, I am fascinated by him because I just believe that Paul was a man who was ahead of his time. I mean, the way that he thought about ministry, um, it was like, if you ever want to read about somebody who completely sold out to the call of God on their life, you need to read some of the stuff that Paul wrote. And not even, of course, I'm reading this from the perspective, that, of course, I want to build ministry, but I mean, even just some of the things that he said, that some of the things that he wrote, so fascinating that it can apply to so many areas of your life, your ministry, your job, just everything. Um, I was reading in 1 Corinthians, the 9th chapter, um, and he wrote, "To the weak I become weak, that I may gain the weak. I am made all things to all men, that I may by all means save some." How incredible is that? Consider this: if every ministry, every preacher, every missionary, every teacher took upon themselves this very simplistic strategy and employed it prayerfully, I, as a servant of God, am going to uh, take upon myself some of the attributes of the individuals that I'm trying to reach, so that I can draw them to Christ. Now, this is a little tricky because some might say, well, um, does this mean that I'm going to go to the bar and have a drink to draw a drunkard? Does this mean that I'm going to go to the prostitute's house and participate in a certain activity in order to draw her to Christ? I don't think that that's what it means. Paul was thinking specifically about those who identified with certain cultures, certain belief systems, certain systems that had customs that were not necessarily, they weren't sinful cultures, but they were cultures that really blocked them from really experiencing God to the fullest. And Jesus had a lot of examples in the time that he spent in the earth, because there were times when Jesus would um, uh, heal someone who was sick, or raise someone from the dead who was dying on the Sabbath day. And the Sadducees and the Pharisees and so many of those religious hypocrites would say, well, why are you doing this on the Sabbath day? Don't you know the law? And Jesus would remind them. He even gave a parable one time that said, if you had, one of your animals, I'm paraphrasing, who had gotten caught in a well on the Sabbath, wouldn't you pull him out? Wouldn't you save him? So Jesus, in his infinite wisdom, gave them examples that would allow them to think beyond just their rules but there were times where Jesus also participated in some of their customs so that he could engage them. And one thing that I find about the church is that there's some things that we say, oh, well, I'm not doing that, or because, the Bible says come out from among them and be separated. And so there's certain little customs and little traditions that I have to get away from. But think about the work of an effective missionary. And I'm not talking about somebody who just has a title. I'm talking about somebody who goes to another country or goes to an impoverished area. Like, if you are going to do the work of an evangelist in a community that's low income, it would not make sense for you to go into that community with a fur coat on. You see what I'm saying? It would not make sense for you to go and minister to a vegetarian and take them a plate of beef ribs. You see what I'm saying? So it's not that you're, going outside of the realms of what God has called you to do in your life, but it's that you're changing your thought process so that in the end you can bring somebody to Christ who probably would not normally know Christ or would not have access to Christ because of the traditional way of thinking within the religious community. Isn't that fascinating? Isn't that innovative? To think that you each of us has the potential to engage someone, to bring somebody to Christ as the intermediate, if we change the way that we think and engage people on a different level. And that means that sometimes you got to get the final call and you got to read what it says, because there's something in that you can engage somebody who does not know Christ, who is pontificating and pushing forward the agenda of another religion that is not consistent with that of Jesus Christ. So that means that you have to know what they're talking about. You have to be able to defend the gospel at all costs. And you cannot do that if you do not thoroughly educate yourself. So how fascinating is it that there are some weak people out there in that they have not come to the full knowledge and the understanding of Jesus Christ because of traditions and thought processes and all of these different things that bar them from a relationship with Christ. But you can somehow find a way to minister to them by speaking on their level. It's like you don't go to a preschool and use your Toastmaster language, You you speak to preschoolers like preschoolers will understand what you're saying. So anyway, that just fascinated me. And I said, you know what? I don't make a lot of YouTube videos these days, but I wanted to share that because thinking about that, it's not like I'm quote unquote preaching to other people or telling you as the viewers what I think that you should do in your life or in your ministry. I'm just saying, this is the revelation that God gave me, and it's number one for me to use, but number two, as I'm on this journey of implementing what the Lord has given me, I can share it with somebody else and perhaps engage somebody else in a deeper level of thinking. Because the truth is that we as a church, as a Christian community, we're real Jesus, we don't want to compete with the world, but really, I was thinking about this, and the Lord said, I was thinking about so many times, especially in the Old Testament, where when nations would go to war, and sometimes there would be times when they would prepare for war, and God would say, well, don't even worry about it, don't even go down to war. But there was a lot of times in the Old Testament where he said, you know what, I want you to go down, just go down to the enemy's camp, and if you will obey the call and what I have asked you to do, once you get down there, I'm going to take care of it. And I believe that that's what God is saying. I just need you to go down to the enemy's camp. I need you to engage the enemy there, because it's not the people, it's the enemy. And if I can get you down there in the camp, I'll give you the words to say. And if I can change your mindset when you get down there, gosh. Anyway, to God be the glory.